In 1989, the Griswolds weren't having a very good Christmas vacation. All the father of the household, Clark Griswold, wanted was to have a nice relaxing Christmas at home with his family, but instead he's having to endure one mishap after the other, not to mention annoying relatives. The chaos reaches its peak when family members can hear a weird squeaking coming from the Griswold Christmas tree, where Clark goes to investigate. Sure enough, there is something in the Christmas tree. A squirrel who seems to have a bloodlust, leaping from out of the tree and causing everyone to panic, and thus creating sheer pandemonium. It's an absolute Yuletide catastrophe at the Griswold household, where no one is safe from these festive disasters. But did you know that scene was to feature a moment where the squirrel ran up Auntie Bethany's skirt, where Uncle Lewis proclaims, "That's okay, nothing can survive going up there." This is just one of many scenes removed from Christmas Vacation. So today we're going to explore many elements that could have made Christmas Vacation a completely different movie, where we ask questions like, why did the movie's original director leave? Who was the missing character who featured in the original short story but not the movie? Could Christmas Vacation really have featured a young Leonardo DiCaprio? Who is the mysterious Jolly Jerry? And what happens when you try to take the Christmas out of Christmas Vacation? So yes, today we're going to explore the version of Christmas Vacation that you've never seen. But in order to understand all the cuts and changes that happened to this movie, we have to go back to the beginning of its complicated origin story, which goes all the way back to 1959. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation did indeed start off as a short story from the outrageous comedy magazine National Lampoon, which ran from 1970 to 1998. The magazine featured many comical stories, parodies, and humorous outlooks on real-life issues of the time. It's here we get to John Hughes. Although he would become famous for giving us many classics like The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Planes, Trains and Automobiles, to name but a few, his professional life was off to a difficult start, where in 1970 he dropped out of the University of Arizona, where he would then start writing jokes for cash to several comedians, including Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers. This would lead him to becoming a writer for the National Lampoon magazine. Two stories in particular that Hughes wrote for the magazine that would cement himself as a famed comedy writer were Vacation 58 and Christmas 59. Two comical stories which were in part supposedly based on Hughes' own childhood experiences. Vacation 58 was about a disastrous family trip to Disneyland, which ends with Clark Griswold going to jail after shooting the Walt Disney. And Christmas 59 was about an equally disastrous Christmas vacation, in which unlikable, difficult relatives flocked to the main family in question, creating all manner of comical and unfortunate shenanigans. Christmas 59 was published in the 1980 December issue of National Lampoon magazine, thus creating the basic structure of what would become the Christmas Vacation movie some 9 years later. There were several differences, the main one being a Thai student called Ex-Gun Woe, who accompanies the grandparents, who is also a kleptomaniac. And in the climax, he tries to steal a car but crashes into an ambulance, where he is then shot with a BB gun. In an article about this character by Cracked.com, they speculate that the character of Ex-Gun Woe probably didn't make it into the movie because he was a racist stereotype. And yeah, look. When you read some of the characteristics of this character, all I can say is, it was a different era. So with Hughes being an accomplished writer for National Lampoon's magazine, it seemed he had a bright future ahead of him, with the magazine's editor, P.J. O'Rourke, saying, quote, "John wrote so fast and so well that it was hard for a monthly magazine to keep up with him. So naturally, the next step for the magazine was movies. Yep, which would lead to John Hughes' stories to be finally realised on the big screen. In 1978, the first National Lampoon movie came out with the release of Animal House, which was a big hit. So Hughes was hired to write the screenplay for the next National Lampoon's movie, Class Reunion, making it his first screenplay. However, upon its release in 1982, sadly this was not a glorious start to Hughes' filmography. Class Reunion was a critical and financial disappointment, seen as a failed effort to try and recreate the success of Animal House. Hughes would chime in on the disappointment of Class Reunion, claiming that he was fired from the production, and that the screenplay he wrote for the movie was, quote, completely butchered. I guess this was his way of sort of detaching himself from this movie. However, the following year, National Lampoon's chief executive, Matty Simmons, commissioned Hughes to write a movie script for his Vacation 58 short story, which would become National Lampoon's Vacation, where Harold Ramis was hired as director and Chevy Chase was cast as the hapless Clark Griswold, both of whom would add their own spin to the story, giving us the story of the Griswold family going across country from Chicago to California in their truckster on a family trip to Wally World, which turns out to be a family vacation from hell, with all manner of hilarious consequences. Unlike Class Reunion, Vacation was a huge hit, which made $61.4 million on a budget of $15 million, and it was also critically praised. So National Lampoon's and Warner Brothers, who distributed Vacation, wanted to get to work on a follow-up, European Vacation, which is pretty much the same as the first movie, in that it's the Griswolds on the road on a vacation from hell, only this time it's in Europe, of course. The production really wanted John Hughes to return to write the script, but he declined. Instead, Weekend at Bernie's writer, Robert Klein, would pen the sequel, with Hughes still getting a writer's credit on the grounds that it was based on characters he created as well as some of his ideas. But despite the credit, he really had nothing to do with this sequel, nor is it based on any of his short stories from the National Lampoon magazine. With Europe Vacation coming out in 1985, it sadly didn't share the same levels of success as its predecessor, with its box office intake being $49 million, which, although was still successful, was a drop in numbers compared to the first movie, and it didn't get the most glowing reviews, with many finding it to be a retread of the first movie, only not feeling as fresh. In later years, stories have come out that this wasn't the easiest movie to make, as Chevy Chase was apparently very difficult while making the movie. So much so, director Amy Heckerling wouldn't shoot the movie unless she had a plane ticket to New York in her hand, so she knew that she could leave at any time. That's how much she really could not stand working with the guy, stating that hers and Chase's relationship was not a marriage made in heaven. But thankfully, she saw the movie through, and, well, that right there could have been the end of the Vacation series. But it wasn't. So after the release of the first Vacation movie, John Hughes' career in movies would continue to flourish, where he would write and/or direct many heartfelt comedies that are rich in outrageous humour, while also having a strong element of human drama, growth and development, where he would go on to give audiences classics such as Mr. Mum, 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, Weird Science, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Pretty in Pink, Some Kind of Wonderful, The Great Outdoors, She's Having a Baby, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, and Uncle Buck. Yep, in the 80s, the guy's writing and directing was on turbocharge, with most of his movies being successful crowd pleasers, as well as all these movies I've just mentioned, with the exception of Mr. Mum, being made in between 1985 to 1989. Yeah, all those movies in just a 4-year span. National Lampoon, however, didn't share that success, as in that time span they didn't make any movies, as after European Vacation they seem to have gone into movie hibernation. The studio approached John Hughes to make another Vacation movie, but Hughes was wary, as he felt that at that stage the Vacation movies were just Chevy Chase vehicles. But Hughes got on board as he could use his other Vacation short story from the National Lampoon magazine, that of course being Christmas 59. Once again, an original story by him, which sees Clark Griswold try to have the perfect Christmas vacation at home, where the house gets bombarded by annoying relatives and everything goes wrong. This actually makes Christmas Vacation a standout from all the other movies in the franchise. The other Vacation movies have a simple formula. the Griswolds are on the road or are in some holiday destination, creating a fish out of water scenario. Whereas Christmas Vacation breaks that mold, as it's homeward bound, with all the oddball shenanigans coming to the Griswolds' home, rather than the Griswolds stumbling upon whatever crazy caper may be happening on the road. It makes Christmas Vacation feel different and stand out, and possibly even more like a spin-off than a sequel per se. In fact, I think some people even see it as its own thing, completely detached from the other vacation movies. Not to mention the fact that it's the only one in the series that is a Christmas movie. Well, almost. I think it shows that you can have a comedy caper with the Griswolds without it being a Griswolds on the road holiday from hell fiasco. And I think it's a shame they didn't get more experimental, but rather just stuck to the whole premise of the Griswolds are going on holiday. Christmas Vacation also feels more like an ensemble piece with a string of characters, which would have helped Hughes' perception of the series just being a Chevy Chase vehicle. In fact, Randy Quaid returns as Cousin Eddie, who was a character seen in the first Vacation movie, and it could probably be argued that he completely steals the show and has some of the movie's best lines. When it comes to the Griswold family, Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo return as Clark and Ellen Griswold, of course. And once again, the Griswold kids were recast, which I think was a tradition at that stage, with Juliette Lewis as Audrey, and future Big Bang Theory star Johnny Galecki as Rusty. Although at one stage in the early production, a young Leonardo DiCaprio was considered to play Rusty. Which, yeah, I can see, as he had the same cheeky little rascal look that Galecki had. The production was off to a rocky start, when Gremlins and Goonies writer Chris Columbus was hired as director, but sadly he had to endure Chevy Chase being, well, Chevy Chase. Supposedly, of course. Apparently Columbus really could not handle Chase, to which John Hughes was like, hey, that's not a problem. If you don't want to work with Chevy Chase, I've got another family comedy Christmas movie you can direct instead. That movie, of course, was Home Alone. So, really, Home Alone, the movie as we know it, came to be because Chevy Chase was, well, Chevy Chase, once again supposedly. Benny and June director Jeremiah S. Chechik was hired as Columbus's replacement and would direct Christmas Vacation instead. There are actually several weird stories surrounding the behind-the-scenes making of Christmas Vacation. Now, the shoot mainly took place in California, with the Griswolds' house and street being a Warner Brothers set. In fact, it was the same neighborhood set used for Murtaugh's residence in the Lethal Weapon movies. It has become the stuff of legend that an earthquake took place during the movie's shoot, in a scene where Uncle Lewis and Aunt Bethany arrive at the Griswolds. Supposedly in that scene, you can see the picture tremor a little, but me personally, I've looked and I can't see anything. And in the scene where Clark gets angry that the Christmas lights aren't working and resorts to punching the Christmas decorations, when he punches the Santa one, he actually broke his pinky finger, but still kept performing for the camera. Despite the weird set of circumstances that happened during the making of Christmas Vacation, the movie was completed and released December 1st, 1989, and was a huge success, making $73.3 million in its box office intake, beating the previous two movies. Yep, everyone loved this new Yuletide offering in the Vacation series. So there are tons of deleted scenes that were either filmed but vetoed from the final film, or didn't even make it past the original script. Some of these include, at the start when Clark flips off the truck driver, in an alternative take, he didn't use one hand but he used both of them. When the Griswold car is stuck under the truck, thinking that they are all going to die, Audrey confesses that she was once hanging out with a boy called Sean under a railroad bridge. I guess the gag is, she confessed a sin and didn't even die. There's a deleted character called Jolly Jerry, who owns the Christmas tree farm, where Clark and his family get their Christmas tree from. Jolly Jerry seems to be pretty relaxed and not really interested in helping the Griswolds. Clark asks Jolly Jerry if he can borrow a saw, after realizing, thanks to Rusty, that he forgot to bring one. But Jerry just hands him a shovel instead. Later on, there's a scene where the Griswolds make Christmas decorations out of popcorn. And throughout the film, you can see these popcorn decorations on the tree, in which Clark explains that that is what people used to do. They would make Christmas decorations from whatever was laying around the house. One scene which I kind of wish they left in, as it sounds really fascinating, sees Clark decorating the Christmas tree and getting covered in pine needles and sap. This causes Clark to get a wastebasket and his own sweater stuck to his hands. And this also causes him and Ellen to be covered in sap a few scenes later in a moment of intimacy, where subsequently Audrey walks in on them, doing the deed, and covered in sap. At the mall, after Rusty walks in on Clark's awkward exchange with the hot shop assistant, Clark tries to downplay the situation to Rusty by insinuating that he's not really attracted to her. Then, as they leave, Clark pushes Rusty through a door so he can get one more look at the assistant without Rusty seeing. Clark then walks through the door that he just pushed Rusty into, only to discover that they are in a women's bathroom, where both Clark and Rusty get slapped and beaten up by the shocked women in the bathroom. There's a scene later on where Clark tests the Christmas tree lights in the attic, and discovers more hidden presents from the past and looks at them, which of course leads him to be trapped in the attic. Ruby Sue and Rocky have to sleep with a cage featuring a bunch of gerbils between them. It's also explained that Rocky pisses the bed. Well, that's just lovely. When Cousin Eddie smells the Christmas turkey, he yells out, boy, do you smell that?" Aunt Bethany apologizes, thinking that he was referring to her farting. The family turkey contains an unopened can of stuffing inside of it, which sounds really unappealing. And the famous scene of the squirrel jumping out of the tree also sees the squirrel running up Aunt Bethany's leg into her skirt, but she doesn't notice, believing all the weird sensations from the squirrel is the result of her girdle. Uncle Lewis concludes that nothing goes up there and lives to tell about it. Wow, how rude. Finally, the movie was to end with Clark's Santa sleigh crashing through the roof of their neighbours, Todd and Margot. Man, I actually feel kind of sorry for Todd and Margot, but admittedly that would have been a pretty funny way to end the movie. Deleted scenes aside, there was an alternative version that tried to take the Christmas out of Christmas Vacation entirely. Well, at least the movie's marketing, where we can see with this UK version of the movie's poster, in which the movie is now called Winter Holiday. And unlike the official movie's poster, which comically shows Clark getting electrocuted on the roof of the Griswold house while dressed as Santa, this alternative poster shows Clark in regular clothes, and he's not holding presents but tools. So, why is this? Why was Christmas completely removed from this marketing presentation? After all, the UK is a place that celebrates Christmas. Well, here's what I think happened. Christmas Vacation actually didn't get a theatrical release in the UK. Instead, in that part of the world, it came out as a straight-to-video release on November 12, 1990. So maybe it was felt that it was being released too early before Christmas, so they had to remarket it as not being a Christmas movie. Look, I have no idea, but presumably someone came to their senses and scrapped this perception, as the movie would be known as Christmas Vacation in that part of the world. Interestingly, there was another old alternative poster that goes back to the sword and sorcery style of artwork that was used for the first two movies' posters. And it's pretty good, but to me, nothing beats Clark being electrocuted while dressed as Santa. I think all the missing scenes, as discussed, would have shown an edgier, more vulgar version of Christmas Vacation, what with its gooey tree sap, sex, bodily fluids, and increase of fart jokes. Maybe these extra scenes would have given the movie an R rating, as opposed to the movie's PG-13 rating that it got. Although I do think some of these scenes, like Clark accidentally wandering into a women's bathroom and the Jolly Jerry scene, were probably cut due to pacing issues. You know, to move the movie on quicker. And after all, when it comes to comedy, timing is everything. I think the movie is better off for having all these scenes cut out, as this movie would go on to become a Christmas classic, and at this stage I don't think we would want the movie any other way, as well as being an entry in the Vacation series, which many claim to be their favourite. Yes, it seems the popularity of this movie has only increased in time, and that pretty much everyone adores it and still celebrates it. I'm sure that to many people it's just not Christmas yet till they see Clark Griswold angrily beat up his Christmas decorations, and that phrases like "shitter was full" is just as much part of the Christmas landscape as other phrases like "season's greetings" and "Merry Christmas." So I think everything turned out for the best. That said though, it would be interesting to see if some of these scenes are in a vault somewhere, and if they ever will be released, for if anything, just out of curiosity. But in the meantime, we'll have to make do with the Christmas Vacation that we currently have. And, well, what a wonderful Christmas gift it is. Cut! Look, I think sometimes things just work out for the best. And I do think that that is definitely the case with Christmas Vacation. Its journey that led to it getting made, and then all the content that was removed, definitely did lead to a perfect movie. Anyway, I'm Minty. And when you think about it, in Christmas Vacation, Cousin Eddie really did save the day. See ya!